That the San Francisco Board of Education has faced about their plan to rename 44 buildings in San Francisco United School District. Well, they're putting those renaming plans on hold. To talk about this topic, I brought on Harmeet Dillon, who is the CEO for the Center for American Liberty, and she has some pretty strong feelings about this as San Francisco schools are still closed. Watching News Now from Fox, I'm Daytona Everett. I am joined now by Harmeet Dillon. She is the CEO of the Center for American Liberty. Harmeet, thanks for joining us again here on News Now.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Okay, so let's dive right in. San Francisco is making headlines again this week. We've been talking about the reopening of schools, but now we're kind of going back to that storyline of renaming schools. Before, they were saying that they were thinking about voting on renaming 44 school buildings from the San Francisco School Board. Now they're delaying that vote. Why is that, and what do you see as the future of this vote here?
Well, when you look at the statement from the Board of Supervisors chair about the delay, it's a really clever non-apology, and it makes the excuse of process and timing as opposed to the substance. It's the substance of renaming the schools in San Francisco, of erasing the history of former presidents, even of sitting Senator Dianne Feinstein and some patriots who contributed significantly to our city's history, and renaming them with woke names. They don't even really have a good idea of who they're going to rename these schools for. And so parents are outraged about this because their children are not being educated right now. And the Board of Supervisors has wasted its time on this renaming project and on deleting the history of merit-based admissions from our top high school, the Lowell High School. And so there's a recall effort going on. So when you ask why, the answer is that because parents are outraged and they're trying to recall members of the school board who led this effort, that is why all of a sudden they're saying, this is not the right time. We should wait until the kids get back into the schools before we do this. They are not saying that they aren't going to do it. They're simply saying that they're going to do it later. That's unacceptable. They don't seem to have gotten the message.
Yeah, no, we're seeing that they said they're going to push it back, like you said, until after they've reopened these schools. But that's a timeline that's pretty unsure even right now as well, right?
That's right. You have legislators who are beginning to hear loud and clear from their constituents that parents are outraged, children are committing suicide at a shocking rate in California and suffering every other kind of health disorder, from mental health to physical deterioration. And it's because the California Teachers Union, which effectively owns Democrat politicians in California, is steadfastly refusing to do their jobs. They're getting paid, they're not doing their job. They're demanding concessions such as getting to the head of the line for vaccination, even though the CDC and scientists have said that that's not necessary for schools to be safe for most teachers unless they're very elderly, which is not really the cohort that we're talking about here. And so this selfishness and this greed is really turning off parents across the political spectrum, which is why back in July, when the governor issued this order to shut down our schools, I, on behalf of the Center for American Liberty, sued the governor on this issue. And now others have jumped in. San Francisco's city attorney has sued the San Francisco Unified School District as well, making the exact same arguments, which is students have a fundamental civil right to education, which is being banned by the state. And, for Gavin Newsom sends his kids to private schools, that's now allowed. So if you're wealthy and well-connected, your children may be able to get an education. Everybody else is basically back of the bus, and parents are not having it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we know what's been causing the delay of the renaming of these schools, but what is causing the delay of reopening these schools?
It's bad science. When you look at the position that the governor has taken in hearings regarding our lawsuit and other lawsuits regarding the schools, it is that the science dictates that schools be shut down. But that's false. And we have a panoply. I think our filings are like this. We have a panoply of experts who have testified to the contrary, including some of the top experts in the country at Stanford, and they are backed up by the CDC. They are backed up by the World Health Organization. There really is no controversy about the fact that children are neither susceptible nor likely to be transmitting this disease, nor is it controversial that the vast majority of teachers in our school system are not in the age range where they're vulnerable. So certainly we can make exceptions and accommodations for teachers who are physically vulnerable for whatever reason. That's easy to do, but what we are doing is imposing the cost of this wrong social policy on all of the children. These children will be permanently scarred. I mean, if I can just imagine going back to my school days, if I had been told in my junior or senior year, or even as a child, that I'm going to just lose a year of school, I would be a very different person. I would not be Harmeet Dillon, who I am here today. And so that social cost is being ignored in this entire situation.
I'm reading that there's supposed to be a vote on Tuesday on these plans to reopen the schools, and that has been a part of this lawsuit instituted by the city, saying that they haven't come together on a plan and they've been required to do that. Do you think that this plan is going to be pushed through? Do you think Tuesday could be a light at the end of the tunnel, or no?
I think not. When you see the most recent filings from the city regarding this matter, the teachers union and the school board are paying lip service to opening, but this sort of, as you saw the press secretary of in the White House say last week, sort of their idea of reopening is a few hours a week, and for some students. And in fact, the mandate from the state that's being discussed right now is to make sure that children who are in the legally protected category of being disabled get a few hours of education a week. It is not all children. It is certainly not, for example, returning children in sports teams to that, even though a judge in San Diego County last week just ordered that. So they don't get it. And in fact, it is shocking that government officials are kicking and screaming in opposition to doing their basic jobs, educating the children. You wonder, why do people run for the school board of San Francisco when they don't seem to be interested in educating children? The answer is it's a stepping stone for other positions in our state government. Many of our current elected representatives in Sacramento made their way through the school board of San Francisco. And so that's why, and it's a callous disregard for their duty, for the children, for their health, their mental health. And we aren't even getting into the misogyny, because in fact, it is generally mothers as caretakers of the children who are negatively impacted in their careers by this as well. So that's a whole other ball of wax that isn't even under discussion in this segment. But overall, I would say that the Brock versus Newsom, which is the schools case that we filed at Center for American Liberty, is by far the highest stakes litigation I've ever filed in my life. And millions of children are going to be affected by the outcome of it. And so in the Ninth Circuit, we will be arguing that case on March 2nd. And hopefully the Ninth Circuit will be more receptive to the argument that children have a fundamental right to education in this country than the district court was in that case.
Yeah. It's interesting because apart from these lawsuits, parents are stepping up as well. There's Zoom-in demonstrations that thousands of students are going about. That means that they're taking their computers, they're going out to the parks, and they're Zooming next to each other, next to their fellow classmates. Do you think that this could make a difference, that their voices will be heard from the school district by doing that?
I frankly think that the only voices that are being heard by politicians are the voices of recall, the voices of election, the voices of taking them out of power. That is really all they care about, because since July of last year, the schools have been effectively closed. The schools and in fact, our former Attorney General here in California, Javier Becerra, is up for head of Health and Human Services. Mm-hmm. My goodness, the biggest science denier of all. He has stood in court with his colleagues, have stood in court and argued that the science is something other than what it is. They have misrepresented the science. They have disregarded the health of the students. They have disregarded the law. They have claimed that there is no constitutional right to education in the United States. This is a shocking position, particularly for liberals to take. They're usually the ones trying to find new constitutional rights. So, I think that we have to hold them accountable. We cannot just sort of go along and get along. There are people who are vulnerable in our society. I may be one of those people. Certainly older people are. Children are not. And most teachers are not. And that is the science.
All right, Harmeet Dillon, CEO of the Center for American Liberty. Thanks for being with us here on NewsNOW from Fox.
Thanks for having me.
You're watching. So there you have it. The latest on coronavirus news coming out of San Francisco.